work on climate change based out of the British High Commission in Singapore, and we have officers working in all of the Southeast Asian countries, and really we try and do three main things, one of which is to work with governments of the region to try and make progress towards a new international treaty to tackle climate change. The second area is we try and work to highlight the likely impacts of climate change in Southeast Asia, how climate change will affect societies, how it will affect economies. And the third area is we work with government and business and civil society to try and help adopt a low carbon society. That is a society that relies on green growth and isn't so dependent on fossil fuels. Yeah, we don't really do research, to be honest. What we try and do is we try and do policy work and capacity building and project work. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to work with governments on their policies and also to put in place projects on the ground that will really improve the situation. Why do we want to do this? I think there are two reasons. One of which is that the British government believes that if climate change gets too bad, then the world will be a very dangerous and unpredictable place. And that will be bad for the UK for lots of reasons. I mean, our country will suffer from the climate impacts, but trade routes will probably be affected. So suppliers of goods to the UK will be affected. British nationals overseas will be affected. We support development around the world, so development goals are less likely to be achieved. So actually there is a real reason to get involved and to try and tackle these sort of issues. So that is one reason. And the other reason is that actually the countries of the region have said that they are very interested in this area, that they are keen to pursue green growth and low carbon development. So they're working in this area anyway. Very often they say to us they would like advice from the UK, and we're very happy to work with them to provide that advice. I don't think you can say which country is most vulnerable, because actually there are lots of different types of impacts from climate change, and different countries will be affected in different ways by different impacts. I would say I think almost all countries are very vulnerable. There are some exceptions. Singapore is a richer country than other countries in the region, and generally the more money you have, the better you can cope. But even in Singapore, they're having issues with flooding that they weren't having in the past, so they are experiencing climate impacts. But if you look at different countries, the Philippines, for example, is suffering very badly from very strong tropical storms coming through. In Vietnam, where you've got a very low and long coastline, but they are very vulnerable to sea level rise, which is expected to happen under climate change. Thailand is the world's leading exporter of rice, and most experts think that as climate change becomes worse and as temperatures go up, rice production will become affected and rice yield could drop. So Thailand's economy could be severely impacted. Indonesia relies a lot on fisheries for income and for food, and fisheries are likely to suffer in the future. They're suffering already because of increased temperature in the oceans. And I could go on for other countries. Actually, all countries are vulnerable in one way or another, so it's quite hard to say which is most vulnerable. But what I would say is that Southeast Asia as a region is probably more than twice as vulnerable as the world average to climate change. If you look at some economic modelling that's been done, there was a report called the Stern Review in 2006, and that tried to estimate what would be the economic impact of climate change. And it estimated that you could see the impact on global economies, reduction of GDP of about 2.5–3% by the end of the century. The Asian Development Bank did a similar report, and that concluded that the impact on Southeast Asia would be about 6.7% of GDP every year by 2100 because of climate change. So every year, 6.7% of GDP will be lost because of climate change. So Southeast Asia, the figure is much higher than for the world average. There are things I can mention, I'm not sure they're my recommendations. I think countries in the region realise them already, so I wouldn't want to pretend I was telling people what to do. But I think there are 2 or 3 main areas that need to be tackled. The first area is that you need good policies on adaptation, that is adapting to climate change. So if you're getting more severe storms, if you're getting more floods, if you're getting sea level rise, how do you change your systems? How do you change your infrastructure to cope with that? Now that is already happening to some extent, but it's quite a complex process because central government may have the information on what to do, but you need to get that information down to local level, to communities. Because if you've got fishermen who will be affected by the fish stocks going down, or people who are planting strains of rice that won't cope so well with higher temperatures, you need to explain to them the measures that need to take place. So you need steps to cope with climate change, adaptation measures, and they need to be spread all around society. So that's one thing. The second thing is you need to encourage green growth. This is growth that isn't so dependent on fossil fuels like coal and oil and gas. And I think most countries of the region say they want to do this where they can. There are lots of opportunities. You can generate energy from clean sources like wind power or solar power, or use waste to generate energy as well. You can also use energy more efficiently. We're sitting in a very nice hotel in Bangkok. Big buildings like this, probably 40-50% of their energy use is through air conditioning systems. Now, very often in old buildings, if you take out the air conditioning system, put in a new air conditioning system, you have to pay to do that. But once you do it, then your energy bills go down because you're using less energy. And over 1, 2, 3 years, the money you save will pay for the initial investment. And then you're just saving money after that. And at the same time, your greenhouse gas emissions go down. So there are lots of very obvious steps that can be taken so that you're growing, or you've still got economic activity, but you're using less greenhouse gases in the process. That's the second thing. And the third thing really is to try and make climate change, I think, across government, across society issue. A lot of people think climate change is just about the environment, just about trees or animals. And it is about that, but it's much, much wider. It concerns economic issues, because your economy will be affected. It concerns health, because some diseases will become more widespread under climate change. It's about water, it's about energy, it's about planning. Really, you need to have an approach that thinks about all those factors, so society can respond properly, and so government is dealing with it in an integrated way, a cross-government way. We do a range of projects. We have some fairly small projects with governments of the region and with civil society and with academic institutions, generally helping them to design policies. So, for example, we worked with TGO, Thailand Greenhouse Gas Management Organisation, last year. They wanted to design a policy to reduce emissions from agriculture, because rice production can produce a lot of methane, which is a greenhouse gas. So we supported their work to do some modelling to better forecast how they can reduce emissions from agriculture. So we do that sort of work. We do a lot of training, capacity building. So we have worked with the UN in Bangkok to provide training in green growth economic policies. And for example, last year we had a training course here in Thailand for about 40 government officials. So they were looking at things like green taxes, green budgetary reform, how do you have sustainable infrastructure, sustainable consumption and production. So we've supported that type of work. And at the same time, the UK government has set aside a large pot of money, about $4.5 billion to spend on climate change projects around the world in the next few years. And some of that money we plan to spend in Southeast Asia, and we hope to spend it in Thailand as well. So there's money we can actually spend on concrete projects on the ground in this country. We haven't decided yet. We have some ideas for projects that we want to take forward, and we'll be deciding that in the next few months. But we're hopeful that we can spend a significant amount of money, so tens of millions of dollars. We hope to continue to work with the Thai government. We've done a lot already. We worked with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs about a year ago. We brought over a delegation from the UK to talk about climate change legislation, and the MFA and the British government worked to look at the legislation around climate change. As I said, we've worked with organisations like TGO. We've worked with the Ministry of Environment as well on a number of occasions. So yeah, there are a number of projects we've worked on in the past, and we hope to continue to do that.